Hi, I'm Chuck Colson with this week's 2-Minute Warning. For the past 20 years, much of my work as a writer and teacher has been driven by the fact that our worldview, that is, how we view all of reality, how we make sense of the world we live in, has enormous implications, not just for each of us as individuals, but for our culture as a whole. That thought was driven home to me again recently during a discussion I had with my colleague and friend, Dr. Glenn Sunshine. We were talking about how the sexual revolution of the 1960s has transformed not only our culture, but our politics and our entire nation. The sexual revolution was simply Freud on steroids. The idea that all of mankind's problems were the result of repressing sexual desires. So our redemption could be found in sexual liberation. Well, it's not hard to document the social carnage that resulted. Out-of-wedlock births, easy access to pornography, cohabitation, divorce, abortion, they've all skyrocketed since the 60s. What's not as obvious is just how this false Freudian worldview transformed our very notion of liberty and rights. Look at some of the landmark Supreme Court cases. In Griswold versus Connecticut, which was about contraceptives, the Supreme Court found that the Constitution implied the right to privacy. The court cited that right to privacy in Roe versus Wade, which of course legalized abortion. In Casey versus Planned Parenthood some years later, Justice Anthony Kennedy, again involving abortion, defined liberty as the right to define one's own concept of existence, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. And then in Lawrence versus Texas, the court struck down Texas sodomy laws, again citing privacy. Notice that all these landmark decisions involved sexual rights. The culture has accepted free sex, so the courts have made sure that virtually any sexual act now has legal protection, all under the guise of the right to privacy and the liberty to define the mystery of human life. You'd think such reasoning would apply then to assisted suicide, but it doesn't. Back in the 1990s, for instance, the Supreme Court upheld Washington State's ban on assisted suicide. Why? Wouldn't the right to privacy and the liberty to define one's own existence or end it apply to suicide like it does to sex? The answer is simple. Society isn't ready to accept the moral legitimacy of suicide. In fact, then Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote, "Throughout the nation, Americans are engaged in an earnest and profound debate about the morality, legality, and practicality of physician-assisted suicide. Our holding permits this debate to continue, as it should, in a democratic society." Well, apparently the debate about free sex is over. The courts have acquiesced. When cultural pressures become so powerful, the courts are ready to abandon tradition and go with the flow. So what do we conclude? Worldview shapes culture, culture shapes politics, which shapes laws and eventually defines our very notion of rights and liberties. Amazing, isn't it? All of this is to say that we Christians are not free to retreat from the culture, to head to the hills and hunker down with our Bibles. No, we've got to engage, leaven, and shape the culture. That shapes the laws we live by and even the decisions of the courts. I encourage you to read Dr. Glenn Sunshine's article on this topic right here at the Colson Center website. Every week we have new, provocative, and mind-opening materials for you right here to help you connect the dots to see how what we believe and how we see in the world have a profound impact on all of life. That's this week's 2-Minute Warning. I'm Chuck Colson.